I'm 24 now, but this all started when I was 20, and my mom passed away. She died suddenly, a brain aneurysm. No warning. 1 second she was texting me about what groceries to grab on the way home, and the next she was just gone. I still remember that call. My dad's voice on the other end, barely holding it together, asking me to come home. Everything about that night still feels like it happened 5 minutes ago. After she died, something shifted in my dad. At first, I figured it was just grief. He stopped shaving, stopped working, stopped cooking, just stopped being him. I moved back into our family home to help him get through it. For a while, we survived on frozen dinners and reruns of whatever was on TV. He barely spoke unless he had to. Then, about a year after Mom died, he met someone, Carla. Now here's where things start to get strange. Carla wasn't some random stranger. She was my former stepmom, his second wife, the one he'd divorced 10 years ago when I was 14. That marriage had ended ugly. I remember screaming matches, whispered conversations I wasn't supposed to hear, and the way Dad slammed the door the day she moved out. For years, he wouldn't even say her name. He acted like she never existed. So when he suddenly told me they were reconnecting, I was floored. They started seeing each other again quietly. He didn't tell anyone else in the family. Not my grandparents. Not my mom's side. No friends. Just me. He swore me to secrecy. Said it would complicate things if people found out. That should have been my first red flag. But I didn't say anything. I thought maybe he was just lonely. Maybe he needed someone familiar. Maybe grief makes people do weird things. Then, 3 months ago, he invited me to his cabin up north. It was a small place he used to take me fishing when I was a kid. It had been abandoned for years. No electricity, no plumbing, just a wood stove, an old radio, and a lake view. He said he was fixing it up. Said I should come see the progress. When I got there, it looked different. The old fish cleaning table was gone. The woodshed was newly stacked, fresh paint on the porch, new curtains in the window. But the strangest part? There were 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom and a pink razor in the shower. I didn't say anything. Not then. But something felt off. I stayed the night like he asked, and the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't supposed to be there, like someone was watching. The next morning, I went to grab something in the shed, found a burner. It was turned off, but I pocketed it anyway, told him I was going to town for coffee and never came back. When I got back to my apartment, I locked the door, pulled the curtains shut, and just sat there staring at that second for hours. I didn't even know why I was so scared to turn it. It wasn't like I thought I'd find a hit list or some wild conspiracy, but something in my gut was screaming at me, this isn't just a phone. I waited until after dark, then plugged it in. The screen flickered once, then again. Old model, Android, beat up, no passcode, just opened straight to the home screen when I swiped. At first, nothing seemed weird. No contacts saved, barely any apps. Just camera, messages, gallery, the kind of setup someone uses when they don't want to leave a trail. I went straight to the text messages, only one thread. The sender was saved as C. There were maybe a dozen messages, most of them recent, all from the last couple weeks. Still no word from her side. Should we try again? He's asking too many questions. You need to keep him away. Burn the letters. All of them, especially the ones from her mother. That one chilled me. And then there was this. If he finds out about the will, we're fucked. I didn't know who they meant by could have been me, could have been someone else. But I knew one thing, whoever C was, it had to be Carla. I checked the gallery next. Only a handful of pictures, and most were boring. Trees, lake views, a fire pit. But then I found a short video. I tapped it. It was taken inside the cabin. The camera's pointed at the dining table. Dad is sitting there, and across from him is Carla, holding a wine glass and talking softly. You can barely hear her, but right at the end of the clip, she leans in and says, "It's too late now. She won't believe you anyway." Then the video cuts out. The timestamp? 2 nights before he invited me to the cabin. I was shaking. I had no idea what they were hiding, but I knew it had something to do with my mom, and maybe even the will she left behind. The problem is, after Mom died, Dad told me she didn't have a will. Said she never got around to writing one. Everything just defaulted to him. But now, I'm not so sure. The next day, I went to my grandparents, my mom's parents. I hadn't told them anything yet, just that I missed them and wanted to visit. But I was hoping maybe they knew something. Anything. A lawyer, a file, even a letter. And that's when my grandma dropped the bomb. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "I always thought it was strange. Your mom told me, just a few weeks before she passed, that she finally finished the will. Said she left something special for you. Did you ever get it?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I already knew the truth. I'd never seen a single word of it, and now I had to figure out why, and what Carla had to do with any of it. After that talk with my grandma, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. My mom had a will. She told people about it. She finished it just weeks before she died, and somehow, it just vanished? That didn't sit right with me. So the next morning, I called every law firm I could find in her area. Small town, not too many options. It didn't take long before one of the names clicked, Marcus Bell. He was a semi-retired attorney who'd handled estate planning for people in my mom's circle. She mentioned him once when I was in college, just in passing. I didn't think much of it then, but now, it felt like a breadcrumb. I finally got through to his office. The receptionist sounded confused when I asked about my mom's will. She put me on hold, came back after a minute, and said Marcus wasn't taking calls. I asked if he was in. She hesitated, then said, Marcus retired 2 years ago. Moved away. That didn't make sense. My mom died less than 4 years ago. If he handled her estate, that timeline should have fit. So I asked if there was anyone else I could speak to. She told me the office had changed hands and that most of the files from the previous ownership had been cleared out. She used those exact words. Cleared out. So I asked the obvious question. Cleared out by who? She paused. Said, I think it was a family member, a daughter or a niece, something like that. I thanked her and hung up. Then I started searching for Marcus Bell. No social media, no forwarding address, no obituary, thankfully, but also no trace. It was like he'd just disappeared. Then, on a whim, I tried a public records site and searched the business license history of his old law office. Guess whose name showed up in the transfer documents? Carla's. Not her full name, but the initials matched. C. Langford. That was her maiden name, a name I hadn't seen in years. I stared at the screen in disbelief. What the hell was Carla doing tied to the business side of my mom's lawyer's office? She wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't even from the same state. There was no reason for her name to be there, unless she had a reason to be close to those files. And then it hit me. She took the will. She had to have. That's why no one ever saw it. That's why my dad told me it never existed. Carla swooped in, got access to everything, and made it all disappear. But why? What was in that will that they didn't want me to see? I didn't know yet, but I was going to find out, even if it meant going back to that cabin and digging through every drawer, every box, and every locked closet they thought I'd never open. Because one thing was suddenly very clear. My dad and Carla were hiding something about my mom's death, and I was done being kept in the dark. I waited until the following weekend to drive back to the cabin. Didn't tell my dad. Didn't text. Just showed up. I figured if they weren't there, I could look around freely. And if they were, well, I had my excuse ready. Told myself I'd pretend I left something behind the last time. A jacket, maybe. A charger. Whatever. But when I pulled up, the place was quiet. No truck in the driveway. No lights on. Just that still, eerie silence that settles over a place in the middle of nowhere. Perfect. I parked around the bend and hiked the rest of the way through the trees, just in case someone happened to pass by and recognize my car. The whole time, my heart was pounding like I was breaking into a stranger's house. But it wasn't a stranger's house. It was my childhood getaway. My mom helped build that porch. I'd carved my name into the base of one of the bunk beds when I was 11. Still, walking up to that door felt like stepping into enemy territory. It was unlocked. That alone told me something. Either they were incredibly careless, or they felt safe here, untouchable. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. The air smelled different, faintly musty, like something had been wet and left to sit. I moved fast, searched every drawer, every shelf, every closet. Nothing. No files, no safe, not even a locked box. But then I remembered the creaky floorboard under the old rug near the fireplace. It used to squeak when I'd run across it as a kid, and my dad would always say, "One of these days I'm going to pull that thing up and fix it." He never did. So I moved the rug aside and pressed down on the board. Still creaky. I grabbed the fireplace poker and wedged it underneath. After a little prying and swearing, the board popped loose. Underneath was a small, shallow space maybe a foot wide. Inside was a metal tin, the kind people use to keep holiday cookies, except this one was rusted and dented and sealed shut with duct tape. I pulled it out, set it on the coffee table, and peeled the tape off with shaking hands. Inside were letters, dozens of them, some in envelopes, some loose, all folded and worn at the edges. I grabbed one from the middle and unfolded it. It was addressed to me. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to give it to you myself. I'm so sorry for that. It was my mom's handwriting. My knees nearly gave out. I read the rest of the letter with tears streaming down my face. She wrote about how proud she was of me, how she hoped I never lost my kindness. She wrote about her fears, how she had a feeling something was wrong, but didn't know who to trust. Then she wrote this: "If anything ever happens to me, go to Marcus Bell. He has my will, and he knows who not to trust." My throat went dry. That letter was dated 2 weeks before she died, and beneath it in the tin was a photocopy of the will, a real legal document, signed and notarized, and in it, clear as day, was a clause leaving the cabin and a sizable amount of her estate directly to me, not to my dad, not to be divided, just mine, which meant he lied. Everything he said about her never writing a will, about inheriting everything by default, it was all a lie. And then I noticed something else. There was one more envelope in the bottom of the tin. This one was different, heavier, thicker, and sealed with red wax. On the front, in my mom's handwriting, were 4 words that made my blood run. Give this to the police. I sat there for what felt like hours, just staring at that envelope. It didn't feel real. Everything up to that point, the texts, the missing will, the lies, it could have all been chalked up to grief, dysfunction, or bad decisions. But this was something else. Give this to the police. I didn't open it right away. I paced. I held it up to the light, like I'd magically be able to see through the thick paper. I even thought about not opening it at all, just driving straight to the nearest station and handing it over, like she asked. But then curiosity got the better of me, and if I'm being honest, I was scared of what the police might do once they had it, especially if I didn't know what was inside. So I broke the seal. There were 2 things in that envelope: a folded handwritten letter and a photograph. The photo was old, creased at the corners. It showed a man, mid-40s, short hair, tan jacket, standing next to a woman who wasn't my mom. They were outside some building, a motel maybe. Their faces weren't close, but they were clearly together, familiar, like this wasn't the first time they'd met up there. I didn't recognize the man, but the woman? It was Carla, and I was stunned, because the timestamp on the photo, scrawled in pen on the back, was from 6 months before my mom died. I unfolded the letter, my hands trembling again. It was written in my mom's unmistakable handwriting, and it read like a confession mixed with a warning. She wrote that she'd found something months earlier, an old receipt stuffed in a coat pocket that didn't belong to her. She thought it was Dad's at first, but realized the jacket was Carla's. Apparently, Carla had left it behind after a family gathering a year earlier, and somehow no one noticed. The receipt led to a storage. My mom, driven by instinct, went and checked it out. What she found inside, she never fully described, but she said it confirmed something long suspected, that Carla and my dad had reconnected long before my mom's death, and more than that, she feared they were plotting something. She wrote, I don't know what they're planning, but it's not just about money. I think it's bigger. I've overheard things. There are documents, records Carla doesn't want anyone to see. If something happens to me, it wasn't an accident. I reread that last line 5 times, my mouth completely dry. If something happens to me, it wasn't an accident. She knew. She knew something was coming, and she tried to leave breadcrumbs in case she couldn't stop it. I sat down hard, the letter slipping out of my hands. I thought back to the night she died. My dad said she'd collapsed suddenly, at home. I was at college 3 hours away. He told me the paramedics tried, but there was nothing they could do. There was no autopsy, no real investigation. We all just believed him, and now I wasn't so sure. I packed up the tin, the will, the letters, the photo, and the envelope, everything, and I drove home in silence. The next morning, I made a copy of the sealed envelope and gave the original, just like she asked, to the police. And now, I'm waiting, because if what she wrote is true, then this goes way deeper than just a missing will. This might be murder. It took 3 days. 3 full days after I handed over the envelope before I heard anything from the police. I was checking my phone every hour, jumping every time it buzzed. I couldn't sleep, could barely eat. I kept thinking someone would come knocking. Maybe my dad, maybe Carla, maybe someone worse. But when the call finally came, it wasn't what I expected. A detective named Lyle. Calm voice, careful words. He said he'd reviewed the envelope and its contents and asked if I was available to come in and answer a few questions. Said they were just verifying the timeline. That's how I knew they were taking it seriously. I showed up the next morning with a folder of everything I'd found. The tin, the letters, the burner phone, the copy of the will. I handed it all over. He flipped through it slowly, page by page, and then stopped at the will. Asked me if I was sure I'd never seen it before. I told him, absolutely not. My dad told me it didn't exist. Said she died without one. That's when the mood shifted. He leaned back in his chair and said, well, if that's true, then someone's lying, and whoever forged the probate paperwork has a serious problem. Apparently, the will had been officially voided in court 6 months after her death, based on sworn testimony from my dad. He claimed no will had been written, and that my mother had told him as much. But now here I was, holding a signed, notarized copy in front of them, and more importantly, the original witness signature matched Marcus Bell. They tried contacting him, and here's where it got weird. Marcus did leave town after my mom's death, not because he retired, but because he was paid to. Someone bought out his tiny office, and then he suddenly decided to move to Arizona. But not before closing over a dozen estate cases, fast, quietly, and in a pattern that now looked deliberate. They were reopening those files. Then Detective Lyle said, almost casually, we're also running a background check on Carla Langford. We found something odd. He paused like he was double-checking his words. Then he said, Langford isn't her legal last name. At least, not anymore. Apparently, Carla had legally changed her name 3 years ago, right after reconnecting with my dad. She'd been using the name Langford socially, but on paper? She was now Carla D. Harper. Harper. My mother's maiden name. It made no sense. Why would she take my mom's last name? Why hide it? Unless, Detective Lyle said the name change hadn't flagged anything before because it was done in a different state, buried in paperwork, almost like she was intentionally trying to create layers between who she was and who she was pretending to be. And then he dropped the real bomb. We're starting to think Carla may have had access to your mother's financial records before she died. There are accounts being investigated now, some that were opened in your mom's name after her death. Identity fraud, possibly embezzlement, and with the way everything lined up, possibly more. They weren't saying it outright, not yet, but they were looking at Carla for more than just a cover-up. The last thing Detective Lyle said before I left, "Don't go back to the cabin, and don't contact your father yet. We'll reach out when we know more," which only made one thing clear. This wasn't just a family mess anymore. This was a criminal investigation. I know I was told not to go back to the cabin. I know how stupid it sounds, especially now that I was officially involved in a police investigation, but I couldn't help it. Something about what the detective said, about Carla changing her name to Harper, had been eating away at me. It wasn't just a coincidence. It was deliberate, calculated, personal. And the cabin? That place wasn't just some weekend hideaway. It had always been my dad's territory, his escape, his control. If anything real was hidden, anything important, it would be there. So I went. I didn't drive all the way this time, parked at a nearby rest stop, and walked the last stretch through the woods, taking the same back route I'd used before. Every step I took felt heavier than the last. The air felt different, colder, still. When I reached the clearing, the cabin looked untouched, curtains drawn, no signs of life. I waited a few minutes to be sure. Nothing. I crept around the side of the house, keeping low, staying in the trees. My eyes were drawn toward the old woodshed. My dad used to keep all kinds of junk back there. Broken tools, fishing gear, half-used cans of paint. But what caught my attention now wasn't inside. It was behind. There was a patch of dirt that didn't match the rest. Looser, darker. Like it had been disturbed recently and half-heartedly smoothed over. It was subtle, but I noticed. And something inside me said, dig. There was a rusted shovel propped up beside the shed. I didn't think. I grabbed it and started digging like I was possessed. Every shovel of dirt sent a jolt of panic through my chest. I didn't know what I was expecting to find. And then, thunk, metal. I dropped to my knees and started brushing the dirt away with my hands. It was a box, medium-sized, padlocked, old, scratched, the kind of box you hide, not because you want to protect what's inside, but because you never want it found. I yanked it out of the ground and carried it inside the cabin, heart slamming against my ribs the whole way. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the damn thing steady. I smashed the lock with the fireplace poker until it finally cracked. Inside? Papers. So many papers, but not the kind I was expecting. Financial documents, not photos. These were private medical, prescription, test results, psych eval, and every single one of them was for Carla. Some dated as far back as 15 years ago. Others were much more recent, some from just a few months back, and they all told a terrifying story. Multiple diagnoses, personality disorder, episodes of violent behavior, a record of involuntary. And then I found a letter clipped to the top of it. Was written by a psychiatrist. I don't remember but the part that burned into my brain was this. Patient displays clear signs of obsession. Former spouse and his late wife expressed repeated fixation on replacing the deceased and becoming sole maternal figure in the family. Strong narcissistic traits with emerging psychotic delusions tied to. That last line made me freeze because it wasn't just about control or money anymore. Carla didn't just want she wanted to become my mom. And she was willing to erase every trace of her to do it, even if that meant something darker. I stuffed everything back into the box, sealed it shut, and ran. I didn't even look behind me, because deep down I had a sickening feeling. Carla was never supposed to leave the hospital, and someone, maybe even my father, helped her get out. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor of my apartment with the metal box beside me, just staring at it like it might explode. The papers inside weren't just disturbing, they were damning. Proof that Carla had been mentally unstable for years, and that someone, probably my dad, had helped keep that hidden, maybe even protected her from getting committed again, all while gaslighting me about my mom's death, the will, and everything in between. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to see him, so I called. Straight to voicemail. I called again, same result. I almost gave up, until my phone buzzed with a message. You alone? It was from my dad. I texted back one word, yes. 10 minutes later he responded with an address I didn't recognize. Not the cabin, not the house, just an off-the-map rental in the next town over. The message ended with, don't tell anyone you're coming. Every instinct in me said not to go, but I needed answers. When I got there, the place was nearly empty. Just a bed, a couch, and a fold-out table. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Eyes sunken, hair a mess, hands shaking. This wasn't the man I remembered from childhood. This was someone cracked open and hollowed out. He didn't say much at first, just looked at me like he didn't know where to start, so I showed him the letter. the psych eval, the copy of Mom's will. I didn't speak. I just dropped them on the table one by one, letting the weight of it settle between us. He didn't even flinch. He just sat back and sighed. Then he started talking, said he and Carla had reconnected after a funeral, not Mom's, one before that, someone mutual. He said she reached out to him when she heard about Mom's death, claimed she wanted to help. At first, he ignored her, but grief does strange things, he said, and after months of feeling hollow, the familiarity felt like comfort, until it wasn't. He admitted it got out of hand fast, that she became possessive, controlling. She started dressing like Mom, copying her mannerisms, calling him the pet names Mom used. He said he tried to pull away, but every time he did, she'd spiral, threatened to hurt herself, threatened to tell people lies about him. And then one night, she said something that made his blood run cold. She told him, "You don't need to feel guilty. I just helped what was already going to happen." He didn't know what she meant, until later, until the autopsy report, which, by the way, he requested be waived. He told me he did it because he couldn't bear it, but now he wasn't sure anymore. Now he thought Carla had poisoned her. He didn't know how. Said there was never any proof, but something always felt off. She'd been fine, normal, until one day she wasn't. And when he saw Carla's reaction to the death, he said it was like she'd been relieved. That's when he knew something was wrong. But by then it was too late. He said he tried to cut her out, told her to leave. But then she told him she had copies of everything. Financial records, emails, things that could make it look like he was involved, that he'd helped. He panicked. He lied to the court about the will because Carla told him to. She promised she'd leave him alone after. Just one more lie, she said. But she didn't leave. She stayed. She took over. She started slipping into my mom's life like it was a costume, and he let her, because he was afraid. But the worst part? He looked me in the eye and said, "I think I was there the night your mom died, and I think I watched her die, and I didn't even know it." That's when I lost it. I asked him, through clenched teeth, why he didn't do anything. Why he let Carla into our lives again. Why he protected her instead of protecting me. He didn't answer. He just stared at the wall and said, "Because I think I loved her. And that's the part I'll never forgive myself for." The air changed after that night with my father. It wasn't just guilt or anger anymore. It was fear. Because once I walked out of that rental house, I knew something had shifted. He'd finally confessed, in his own broken way. And whether or not he thought Carla poisoned my mother, the facts were stacking up. I'd handed the will to the police. I had the burner phone. I had the psychiatric records. Carla had to know. I tried to stay calm the next day. Went through the motions. Grocery store, emails, answering texts from friends I hadn't told anything to, pretending to be normal. But I could feel it. Eyes on me. At first I thought I was imagining it. That post-confession paranoia, maybe. But then things started happening. I walked out of my apartment to find my car door wide open. Not broken into. Just open. Nothing stolen. Nothing moved. Just open. I got a call from an unknown number that hung up the second I answered. That happened twice. The third time, I let it ring. They left a voicemail. It was nothing but static. Then, that night, I noticed a car parked across the street. Black sedan. Tinted windows. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, except it stayed there for hours. Engine off. No one came in or out. At 2 a.m., it was still there. I tried to sleep, told myself it was nothing, but around 3:30 a.m., I heard something outside my window. Not loud, just a soft tapping, like someone dragging their fingers across the glass. I live on the second floor. There's no balcony. I didn't look. I couldn't. I just sat there, frozen, until the sun came. When I finally dared to check, there were smudge marks on the outside of long, greasy streaks like someone had leaned against the glass. I called Detective Lyle the next morning, told him everything. He was quiet for a long time, then asked, "Do you think she knows you've seen the documents?" I told him yes. I was sure of it. He told me to stay at a friend's place for a few nights. Somewhere safe, somewhere not obvious. So I packed a bag and left. I didn't post anything. Didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not even my father. And still, she found me. It was 2 days later. I was leaving the corner store near my friend's place, head down, hoodie up, trying to stay invisible. I passed someone on the sidewalk, just a blur of motion, and my stomach dropped. Carla. Same red coat she used to wear when I was a teenager. Same perfume. She didn't look at me. She just smiled as we passed. Like she'd been expecting me. Like she was saying, "I'm not scared of you." I turned to follow her, but she was already gone. Vanished into the street like a shadow. I called Lyle again. Told him what happened. He didn't tell me to calm down this time. He just said, "We're issuing a warrant for her arrest." The morning after, I called Detective Lyle about seeing Carla near the store. I was half expecting to wake up to a knock at the door. Maybe the police, maybe Carla. But instead, I got a phone call. Not from the police. From my father. His voice was barely above a whisper. He said one sentence that I will never forget. "She's gone. Carla's gone. She took everything and disappeared." I couldn't believe it. I asked him what he meant, but he was rattled. Said she packed up in the middle of the night, took his laptop, cash from the safe, even a few old photo albums. But the worst part? She'd taken my mom's wedding ring, the one he kept in a locked box. No one even knew he still had it. Gone. The police issued the warrant. They put out bulletins, checked bus stations, border log, but it was like Carla just vanished off the face of the earth. No trace, no sightings, no transactions for weeks. That was it. Silence. Until I got a letter in the no return address. Handwritten. My name on the envelope in the familiar curve of my mom's handwriting. But this one was different. This one hadn't been in the tin under the floor. This one had been sent. Fresh. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a folded page, clearly written years ago. The paper was yellowed, the ink slightly faded. But it was real. And the date? 2 days before my mother died. The letter was addressed to whoever finds this. She wrote that she believed someone had been going through her things, that her documents weren't safe, that she feared Carla had somehow gotten back into her life through back channels, through people she once trusted. Then she wrote something that chilled me to my bones. I found her journals. The ones from years ago, before she married your father. Carla wrote about me back then. Obsessed. She wanted to replace me. Said I took her life. That everything I had should have been hers. My mom had discovered Carla's fixation long before they ever reconnected. She'd even confronted her once, years earlier, but Carla denied everything and vanished. Until she didn't. Until she came back. And this time, with a plan. My mom ended the letter with one final, "If anything happens to me, know this. It wasn't random. It wasn't fate. Carla's been trying to erase me for years. Don't let her finish what she started." I didn't even cry when I finished reading it. I just sat there, feeling numb, letting the reality settle over me like a fog. This wasn't just about a jealous ex. Carla had spent years building her way back in, stalking, manipulating, lying, and when she couldn't get the life she wanted through charm, she took it through erasure. She removed my mom from the narrative, starting with the will, then the photos, then even the memories. She wanted to become her. And my dad? He let her in. Whether out of guilt, grief, or weakness, I'll never fully understand, but I do know he'll have to live with what he allowed, what he covered up. Where Carla is now, no one knows. The case is still open. Fraud, identity theft, and possibly even homicide are on the table, but with no physical proof of how my mother died, only suspicion, and one haunting line. Justice still feels far away, but I've stopped waiting for closure. Instead, I moved out of the city. New apartment, new job, new locks on every door. The cabin was sold. The house burned down last month. Accidental electrical fire, they said. I didn't ask questions. I didn't drive by. I just watched the pictures online and felt like maybe, for once, the past was burning itself away. Sometimes I still wake up thinking I saw Carla in a crowd. Sometimes I check my mailbox 3 or 4 times just to be sure nothing new has arrived. But most days I just remind myself, she didn't win. My mom's memory is safe now, and no one, not even Carla, can rewrite the story anymore.